Alright, this is going to be a quick and simple video explaining how we're going to install Python for the purposes of our projectile simulator that we're going to be making together. This whole process, we're going to assume very little background knowledge in programming, very little background knowledge in just about everything in general. We're going to try and do a step-by-step learning process together. Python is, of course, a very popular programming language, and we're also going to install something called Pygame, which is a library for Python. And a library is something that someone else has made that does a lot of the heavy lifting. So in our case, there are certain things that would take several lines of code, maybe a few dozen lines of code. And rather than try and figure all that out together, we're going to let Python do a lot of that, and we're going to compress, or sorry, not Python, Pygame, do a lot of that heavy lifting, and it'll help us. We'll be able to use functions in Pygame that are just one-line functions that'll do what would take normally much more code. Right, so it's a way of simplifying our particular script for our projectile motion. So this video is just going to explain how we install Python and how we install Pygame. So I've uninstalled it all from my computer so that we can walk through it together. First, we're going to go to our favorite search engine. We're going to type in Python. You could also go to python.org, and it'll take us to a link. That's how we're going to get to python.org. We're going to click right there. And this is what the website currently looks like. Of course, I can't promise that it's going to look like this forever, but you'll find somewhere on there, you'll find a downloads link. Right now it's right here. And there's a download for Windows. Okay, so I'm using Windows. So if you're not using Windows, then you'll want to click on one of these other links here. But I'm using Windows, so I'm going to click on the Python 3.6.5. That's the current version. If there is a newer version, then by all means, install the newer version. Python's pretty good at being backwards compatible, so there shouldn't be any issues. So we're going to click on this. It's going to download Python, the executable. Once that's finished, we're going to click on that. And we've got a little bit of work to do before we actually install. We don't want to just click on the install now. The first thing we want to do is you'll see down here at the bottom of this window, there is an Add Python 3.6 to Path, and that's currently unchecked. We want to check that because the way we're going to install Pygame is we're going to use a command window. And we want to make sure that our command window can see Python. So we're going to add that to our path. Then we're going to do a custom installation, because if you really know what you're doing, if you know Python and if you know how to install libraries, that's fine. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this really long, complicated directory for installing stuff to Python. We're going to make that a little simpler. So we're going to go to Customize Installation. All this is fine. We want to install all that. We're going to leave all that checked. And then, okay, so this is what we want to change. We want to, here in the where it's going to install, we're going to get rid of all of this big long line thing here. Okay. So now we've just got the C, the colon, and the backslash, right? We're going to install right in our root directory. We're going to type in Python 3.6, right? Or whatever version you installed. If you installed 3.7, then you'll type in Python 3.7. It's just a way of remembering what version you're currently using. You can call this whatever you want, but we're humans and we like to see things that we recognize. So Python 3.6. Okay, we're going to install that there. We're going to let it do its thing. Sorry, we just black on you there for a moment, I know, but my computer wanted to make sure everything was safe. Okay. So while this is installing, it's going to take just a moment here. While this is installing, let's go ahead and go back up to our, we're going to go over to Pygame. So we're going to go into our favorite web browser, our favorite search engine, and we're just going to type in Pygame. You could also just go to pygame.org, right? But just to make sure we can all get there, you'll find pygame.org. Okay, so we're going to click on that. And this is a little bit less friendly than as you can tell, than the regular Python website. But up at the top there is a Getting Started link. You'll notice there's no downloads, nothing obvious here. We're just going to click on that Getting Started link. That's what we want. Okay. So it looks like Python, while we got there, it looks like Python was successful. And so this looks good, but we're going to make sure. Let's go ahead and close that because everything looks good. Let's come down here to our Windows in the bottom left corner, and you should be able to now scroll to the P section of your programs, and you should see Python, in my case, Python 3.6. There should be a little folder there. If you click on that, you should see idle, which is the editor that we're going to use to make when we actually go and do our coding. This is what we're going to do it in, is in idle. So we'll see that in a little bit, but this all looks good. So we should see this right here. Okay, back over to Pygame. So you'll notice we still don't have a download here. There's no button to click, but there is this line right here. And so this is how we're actually going to install Pygame. We're going to copy that whole line, I'm going to hit Control C. That's how you copy. You could also, of course, right click and just copy it. Right? Control C is the hotkey for copying. We're going to come down here to our search bar and we're going to type in CMD. And the first thing that's going to come up is our command prompt window. This you can also just hit enter in the search bar. This works in other versions of Windows as well, like Windows 7. But in Windows 10, it'll give you this little icon. We're going to click on that. Okay. So this is a command prompt window, and this is how we're going to install Pygame. You can see the first thing that it does is it takes you to your current user directory. That's not where we want to install this, so we are going to we're going to type in CD, that stands for change directory, and we're going to put in a backslash because we want to drop all the way back up to the root directory. Okay, so we're going to hit enter, and once we have done that, now you'll notice that we're no longer in our user directory, we're just in the root directory, our C drive, and we're going to hit Control V. That'll paste that whole line in there. If that doesn't work for you, sometimes command windows can be a little persnickety. Then just type it in, right? Just make sure that you can see the line, and you'll just type the whole thing in. It's important that all your spacing is correct, all of your capitalization is correct, but if you type that in letter for letter, that'll work as well. Now the one thing we want to change, I'm not really sure why, but they've got this Python 3 line here, and if you hit enter right now, it's going to tell you that Python 3 isn't a recognized command. In fact, why don't we go ahead and do that? We'll just hit enter. And it says Python 3 isn't recognized. Well, that's because Python is the command that we're going for. So we're going to type that in again. In my case, again, I'm just hitting Control V here. And now I'm going to use the left arrow to back that little cursor all the way back up to Python 3 here. And I'm going to, right in front of the 3, I believe. So right from with the cursor right here, we're going to hit backspace. And we're just going to delete that 3. Okay, so now we're going to hit enter. And it's going to install, right? Collecting Pygame. You're going to see this is going to populate a little bit with various things. It'll take just a few moments here, but you should see after a little bit, you should see successfully installed Pygame. Okay, so we've got Pygame installed, but how do we know everything's working? Well, you'll see here on the website it says, okay, so to see everything works, you can actually just run one of the examples. This line right here will only run if you have correctly installed Python and if you've correctly installed Pygame. So we're going to click on that. And once again, we're going to get rid of that 3, and we're going to hit enter. The music and the terrible. Okay, so that's what you need. Once you're there, once you can run that irritating aliens game, you might want to mute your computer before you do it, then you know for sure that you've installed Python and you've installed Pygame, and we're ready to start coding. Okay, so that's all we're going to do for this video. The next one we'll actually start. We'll download the package that I've made, and we'll actually start doing a little bit of programming. So I'll see you then.